so let's get started. The slides should be up on the website. I just put them up like 10 minutes ago, so if you want to follow along online, they should be up. Okay, so today, last class, I got a lot of questions about how all the mathematical calculations I make are for maximizing your expected number of chips. And so a lot of you complained and said, oh, but staying alive in the tournament and just folding a lot is really important, even if you don't maximize your expected number of chips. So since there were a lot of questions about that, I thought I'd go a little bit more in depth on this phenomenon. So usually the word for this phenomenon is called ICM, which stands for Independent Chip Model. So, okay, so in a cash game, so I talked about this first class, a cash game is where you just play poker at a table, you bring real dollars with you, and you can play for however much you want. You can bring as much money as you want. It doesn't really matter how much money you bring. So in this game, the chips are basically the dollars, right? The big blind will be $2 or something like that. And every chip is just dollars. So clearly in this situation, maximizing your number of chips is what you want to do, right? Because you're just maximizing your number of dollars. There's no factor like, oh, I have to survive, because if you lose all your money, you can always bring more money, and you can leave at any time, you can join at any time. So is that clear? So normally in a cash game, you want to just maximize your expected number of chips. So that's clear, right? That makes sense? Okay. So now I told you to do the same thing in tournaments, but there is this factor of staying alive in tournaments, right? If you lose all your chips, you can't just take another $100 out of your wallet and come back into the tournament. So this is relevant, but the thing is, this factor is not as relevant as I think a lot of people are thinking. So I'm going to mathematically calculate this. Okay, so ICM is basically a way to calculate exactly what your equity in a tournament is. So let's say there's 3 players left, okay, and first pays $5, second pays $3, and third pays $2. So the statement of ICM, which is a very reasonable statement, is it says your chances of winning the tournament is proportional to your percentage of the total chips. So in this situation, the statement would mean player 1 would win the tournament 50% of the time. Because, so suppose the chip stacks are, player A has 5,000 chips, player B has 3,000 chips, and player C has 2,000 chips. Then there's a mistake. Sorry, okay. I meant if you're player C. Okay, so the slide is wrong. Okay, so if you're player A, your chances of winning the tournament is 50%. So if you're person C, then your chances of winning is 20% by this model. And then to calculate your chances of coming second, so I guess this is just some probability math. Hopefully everyone knows what I mean. So you're trying to calculate the chances that you come second, and the way you do this is you condition on the fact that player A wins and also condition on the fact that player B wins. So is this clear to everyone what I mean by condition? So you first consider the case where player A wins, and that happens 50% of the time. And assuming that happens, if you know for a fact that player A will win, your chances of coming second is basically your. Oh wow, okay, I made this. Sorry. Okay, I'm gonna just edit this. Okay, sorry, I apologize. Okay, I made this in such a hurry. Okay, sorry, this is wrong. I'm sorry, you guys, hold up. Okay, so let me fix this. Okay, so if you're person C, your chances of winning are 20%. Okay, your chances of coming second. You first look at that case where A wins, which happens 50% of the time. And then your chances of coming second is simply 2,000 divided by 5,000. It's 2,000 because if player A wins, you just got to take your number of chips, which is 2,000, divided by the total number of chips that don't belong to player A, which is 5,000, right? Because if you assume that player A wins, then between the two of you, the one who survives the longer is proportional to your number of chips. So it's 2,000 divided by 5,000, which is 0.5. 4. Okay, I did that right? Okay, and then conditioned on the fact that player B wins, your chances of coming second is 2,000 over 7,000 because player A has 5,000 chips. So this is 2 over 7. Okay, so overall your chances of coming second is 1/5. So I sort of skipped a step. This is actually 0.5 times 0.4. Okay, so at least the final number is right. Okay, I apologize. Sorry. Okay, this should be correct. Okay, I'll do it in the right order. So. Okay, I think this makes sense now. Okay, so this is correct. Okay, I apologize for that. I messed up a bunch of numbers. Okay, so does this make sense to everyone? I'll run that through again, because there were mistakes the first time. So, to calculate your chances of coming second, you first consider the case where A wins, which happens 50% of the time. And then after that happens, your chances of winning is just 2,000 divided by the sum of your chips plus player B's chips, which is 0.4. And conditioned on the fact that player B wins, your chances of coming second is 2,000 divided by the sum of your chips plus player A's chips, which is 7,000. So it's 2 sevens. So overall, your chances of coming in second is actually 2 sevens. So when you do all these numbers, you actually get 2 sevens back, which is just kind of a mathematical coincidence. So your equity in this situation is basically, it's $2 plus 0.2 times $3. So you have a 20% chance of winning an additional $3, right? Because the payoffs are first place pays $5, then second place pays $3, and third place pays $2. So your equity is $2, which are guaranteed, plus 0.2 times the extra $3 from going first. And then 2 sevens is approximately 0.285, so just 0.29 chances of that of winning the extra $1. So your equity here, even though you only have 20% of all the chips, is actually 28.9, 29% of all the money. Okay, so doing that calculation, even though I messed it up badly the first time, so I'm going to go back to this now. So you actually don't have to practice how to do that calculation very well, because it's impossible in practice anyway. So if there's like 7 players left, to calculate the chances of you coming 6th, you need to do basically you need to sum 120 terms, because you got to consider all possibilities of 5. Actually, it's more than that. So okay, there's lots of math mistakes here. It's actually more than that, because of the other 6 players, you got to choose 5 of them and consider all 5 quarters. So I guess it's like, yeah, you got to multiply this by like 6 or something. Yes, okay, so it's 6 factorial. It's like 720. Okay, so I'm clearly not very good at math. But the point is, it's very easy to calculate these numbers. You go ICM calculator and it'll do it for you. Okay, hopefully there's no more math mistakes. Okay. So let's look at an actual situation. So it's going to be the same situation, and now we're going to plug in some calculations with some actual cards. So there's 3 players left. And it's the same thing, the payouts are 5, 3, 2, and the stack sizes will also be 5,000, 3,000, 2,000. So we're going to do some math for how much equity you need to call and all in. And this calculation is going to take into consideration the fact that you're wanting to stay alive in the tournament. So this calculation purely maximizes your expected money payout. It doesn't just maximize your expected chip payout from the tournament. So if this calculation says that you should call, this already takes into consideration all factors. There shouldn't be any more complaints about, oh, I want to stay alive in the tournament, because this calculation already takes into account the fact that you want to stay alive in the tournament. So, okay, so let's say the situation is this, right? So the starting stack sizes are 5,000, 3,000, 2,000. You're the player with 3,000 chips, and the payouts are 5, 3, 2. And the button goes all in for 1,900, right? So the big blind is 400, and the ante was 100. So in this situation, you need to call 1,500 after which the pot will be 4,300. So normally, if this was a cash game, if you were playing for dollars, you would need 35% equity with your hand for the play to be a positive expectation play. Okay, but under ICM, the calculation is slightly different because your equity is not exactly how many chips you have. So you need to consider the three possibilities. So let's suppose if you fold. If you fold, then this guy will win the pot, which is going to be in total 2,800 chips, right? 1,900 plus 900. I didn't mess that up, right? Okay, good. So your stack will be 2,500, and the other guy's stacks will be 2,800 and 4,700. So equity, according to the ICM calculator, is not $2.5. It's actually $3.07. Okay, now let's consider the case where I call and I lose. If I call and I lose, then I'm going to be down to 1,000 chips, and the other two guys will have 4,300 and 4,700. If you plug it into the ICM calculator, it's going to tell you your equity here isn't $1 like it would be if it was just the 1,000 divided by the 10,000 total chips. Your equity here is actually $2.46, which makes sense, right? Your equity should never be less than $2 because third place guarantees at least $2. So your equity here is $2.46. Okay. The third case is you call and you win. Then the button will be knocked out, and you're going to have 5,300 chips, and the other guy will have 4,700. Then your equity is $3, which is guaranteed now, plus 0.53 chance of winning an additional $2, right? Because you have 53% of the chips now, is $4.06. So, okay. So the way to calculate this is you suppose your chances of winning the hand is X. So X needs to be high enough such that your expected payoff from calling is greater than your expected payoff from folding, right? So we know that your expected payoff from folding is $3.07, because if you fold, this is what the stacks will look like, and that's what the ICM calculator will say. So make sure you actually understand this calculation, because the previous calculation you never have to do by yourself. This calculation you actually have to do all the time by yourself. So make sure you understand how to do this calculation. That's why I messed the other one up so bad, because I never practiced it. Okay. So if you fold, your equity is $3.07. Now, if you call, then it's X, which is your chances of winning, times 4.06 plus 1 minus X, which is your chances of losing, times 2.46. So if you solve, you'll get that as long as X is at least 38%, this is a positive money payoff play. So as you can see, if you do the old calculation that I did, you needed 35% equity. But if you take into account the consideration that you want to stay alive as long as possible, you still only need 38% equity. So yes, you could fold a bit more because you're trying to stay alive, but the difference is not that high. I did a rigorous mathematical calculation proving that the equity you need is only 3% higher in this situation than what we normally need. So this is what basically an ICM calculator looks like. So you plug in the stack sizes, and it'll tell you player one's chances of coming first, second, third. Sorry, this is I guess it's here. Yeah, player one's chances of. So this is like the total payoff. So this is like player one's expected payoff, player two's expected payoff, player three's expected payoff, and the total payoff is 100. Yeah, I guess this number is the sum of these three numbers. So like this number is the chances of winning times 50. And yeah, that makes sense. Okay, right, so let's assume that the button is going along with 50% of hands. Then even with 7-6 suited, a hand that's only 7 high, this has 39% equity, and it would be enough to call. And with King 3 offsuit, it would definitely be enough to call. And if his range is only the top 30% of hands, which is absurdly tight, then you only have 37.6 equity. So remember the numbers. We needed 38% equity for the play to be plus money expectation, and we needed 35% equity for the play to be plus chip expectation. So if you called in this situation where you only have 37.6% equity, you would be maximizing your expected number of chips, that would be positive. But your expected money would actually be negative. So calling is a bad play because even though the expected chip change is positive, the expected money change is negative. Okay, so here's a few cases where ICM is easy to calculate. So no more numbers, just some general pointers. So in cash games, there's no such thing as ICM, right? I already talked about this. You always maximize your expected number of chips. And in winner-take-all tournaments, suppose the tournament only had a prize for first place. It's the same thing. Because your expected number of chips is proportional to your chances of winning the tournament. And you only get paid for getting first. And like, if there's only 2 players left in a tournament, it's the same situation as a winner-take-all tournament. Because you can just assume you're both guaranteed the minimum payout, and there's a bonus for the winner. So in these situations, you should be riskier than in the tournaments that you've been playing online. But even in the tournaments that you're playing online, based on what I've seen from watching, people are still being way too risk-averse. So remember, just usually the percentage equity that you need to call is only going to be 2 or 3% higher than normal. So if you calculate that you need 35% equity to call, if you don't want to do this entire ICM calculation, then just add like 2 or 3% to what you need, and that will usually be about it. Okay, so I did choose an example in this calculation where the difference between money EV and chip EV is small. So one example, if you see where the difference can be big, is imagine you're far into the payouts of a big tournament, and you have, let's say, just 0.1% of the chips, right? Then clearly, which is a very small fraction of the chips. So clearly your money EV will be significantly higher than the chip EV, because your chip EV, you have such a small percentage of the chips that your chip EV is like 0, but your money EV is still pretty high because you're guaranteed like a 9th place payoff or an 8th place payoff or whatever. So in this case, folding a really good hand could potentially be okay, just to like survive longer, since you have no hope of winning the tournament anyway. So another example of extreme ICM tournaments is satellite tournaments. So what this means is, suppose there was like a tournament where the top 9 players got a free trip to Paris or something. The top 9 players got a good vacation, and you get the same prize. You don't get any more for coming first rather than coming 9th. Okay, so the top 9 players all get the same prize, and there's 10 players left. So in this situation, you just want to survive. And because there's no incentive for trying to win. But in the tournaments online that you're playing right now, there's still a very big incentive for trying to win. Like, first we'll give you like 10 points, and like 9th will give you like 2 points or something, right? So in satellites, there can be extreme examples where someone goes all in, and you have like pocket aces, and you have to fold, just because you can't risk it. And even if they tell you, oh look, I have 3-2 offsuit, you still have to fold even if you have pocket aces, knowing that they have 3-2 offsuit, just because calling and risking coming 10th and not having that vacation is so drastic compared to the benefit of winning and having a chance of coming first, because coming first doesn't matter. So satellites are some more facts about ICM. So small stacks have a higher money EV than chip EV. Big stacks have a lower money EV than chip EV. And when there's about to be a large pay jump, the difference between money EV and chip EV is more significant. So, like, if it's about to be the final table, or on anytime on the final table, the difference between money EV and chip EV is significant. If it's early on in a tournament, basically money EV and chip EV are the same. Like, if it's the first hand of the tournament, you should just maximize your number of chips. There's no point in trying to survive when it's the beginning of the tournament, because you have no hope of surviving if you don't win some chips, right? So that makes sense. And in general, in these situations, the big stacks should go all in more frequently, and the small stacks should rarely go all in. So you're going to see some examples of this when I finish replaying the tournament that I started replaying last night. Right, so the point of ICM is basically, it's like a traffic intersection game. So on the way here, I was running late, and I was trying to go as fast as I can on my bike. And it's like the situation where, like, if I'm trying to cross the street and a car is trying to cross the street, If I just go onto the street, I know that the car cannot possibly run me over. And like I was just trying to go really fast, so I had to do a lot of risky things to get here, try to get here on time. It's sort of like the same thing with ICM in the situation where if the top 9 players get a free vacation. You know, if I'm just telling my opponent that I have 3-2 offsuit and I'm going all in, even if he has pocket aces, he can't call, and I know that. And I just, you know, it's sort of like going all in with 3-2 offsuit. With 3-2 offsuit is like going in the middle of the street where you know it's stupid, but you know that the other guy can't run you over. It's like the same thing. You go all in with 3-2 offsuit, you know it's stupid, but you know the other guy can't risk calling. Right? This is like, if you're familiar with the term prisoner's dilemma, this is like a prisoner's dilemma situation, basically. Okay, so are there any questions about that? So I went pretty in-depth into that, more than I was initially intending to, but I got a lot of questions about this, and I thought the math might be interesting. So are there any questions about this before I go on? Yeah? Yeah.
So in the 10-person discussion, the optimal strategy is that
if all players play optimally, what would usually happen is the first guy to act would just go all in with any 2 cards, and then everyone else will fold. But if you're the first person to act, you might as well go all in with any 2 cards because you know everyone else will fold. So that tournament will never end until the blinds go up, and eventually the blinds will be so high that a player will be all in from just the and then go. Yeah. Okay, so let's go on. Okay, so some flop numbers to memorize. I also got some questions on this, so it's good if you just look at slides like this and just memorize some of these percentages. But there's some basically rules of thumb, and I talked about this, so I'm going to go through this quickly. Basically, bigger pair against smaller pair is usually around 80%. A pair against 0 overcards, so like a pair against 2 cards that are smaller is usually 80% as well. It can vary a lot, like pocket aces against ace-king offsuit, you're as good as 93%. Like queens against 7-4 off, 84.8%. Jacks against 10-9 suited, 81.7%. Here's 2 trivia facts that might be cool. What's the hand that does best against pocket aces? The answer is 6-5 suited. 6-5 suited is 22.5%, which is better than any other hand against pocket aces. And the other trivia question is, what's the highest equity you can possibly have getting it all in pre-flop? And the answer is pocket kings against king 2 offsuit, which is 94.6%. It's not pocket aces against ace 2 offsuit because they can hit a straight more easily with an ace and a 2 because they only need 3 cards. Okay, here's some other pre-flop numbers. A pair against 1 overcard is usually a 70-30. So queens against ace jack. As you can see, queens against ace jack suited, you're about 3% worse, 4% worse. You're only 68%. So the flush, being suited and being good with the flush is very relevant. And it doesn't matter if their other card is the same as you, it's still around the same. So queens against ace queen suited. So it is a bit worse because it's harder for you to hit 3 of a kind. But it's not too much worse. It's like 2% worse. Ace queen suited as opposed to ace jack suited. So here's more examples. Okay, so if you're dominating the other person, which means ace king against ace queen or ace queen against ace jack, you're usually also around 70-30. So if you look ace king against ace queen offsuit is 75.4%. Ace king against king queen is ace king against king queen is 74.8%. So it's slightly better because if you have the same top card, the board will become 2 pair, like 2-2, 3-3, 4, and then the ace king will tie ace queen. But against king queen, if the board comes 2-2, 3-3, 4, you don't tie, you beat them. So it's usually better to have the same small card rather than have the same big card. So as you notice, ace 5's off against ace 2 off, you're only 56%. You're only barely better than 50%. And the reason is because usually the 5 won't even matter when 5 cards come on the board, right? If the 5 cards on the board is 6, 8, 10, queen, king, your 5 isn't going to matter. For your 5 to matter, you need 2 cards between 2 and 5. So like you need like a 3 and a 4 for your 5 to matter, right? So that's why it's only 56%. As you can see, it gets lower and lower as as the other card you have is small. Ace-8 against Ace-2 is 65%. Ace-Jack against Ace-2 is 72%. Ace-King against Ace-2 is going to be like 75% or something. 2 overcards versus a pair is about 50-50. It varies. Ace-King against Queens is only 43% because Queens block a lot of your straights. And 10-9 suited against pocket 2s is a whopping 54% because you can hit lots of straights and they have no blockers too. Okay, if you assume that A is greater than B greater than C greater than D, where all 4 cards are different, usually if you have the A, you're going to be a 60-40 around. I mean, it depends on a lot of factors, but a general rule of thumb is if you have the highest card and all 4 cards are different, you're around 60-40. So Ace-King against 7-6, 61%. Ace-King against Queen-7 is 67%. If you have Ace-2 offsuit against 10-9 suited, you're only 51%. So I guess that's a bit different. So remember some numbers. Okay, so let's look at this chart carefully. Ace-King off against Ace-Queen suited, you're 70. Actually, let's look at this first. So Ace-King off against Ace-Queen off, you're 74.4%. Okay? If you make your card suited, you only increase by 1%. But if you make their card suited, you drop off by like 4%. And suitedness changes your equity so much when you're behind, whereas it changes your equity much less when you're ahead. Because when you're behind, you need as much ways to improve and beat them as possible, right? So suitedness matters a lot. But if you have a hand as good as Ace-King, the difference between Ace-King suited and Ace-King offsuit isn't that high, because usually you're going to be winning anyway without having to hit the flush. So suitedness matters a lot more when you have a hand like 5-4. You must need your hand to be suited. 5-4 suited is just miles and miles better than 5-4 offsuit. But Ace-King suited and Ace-King offsuit are kind of similar because your hand is so good at it. So this is why when you're the one going all in, you really want a suited hand. But if you're the one calling, you know, the difference between whether I should call with Ace-Jack offsuit and Ace-Jack suited is very minimal. But the difference of whether I should go all in with 5-4 suited versus 5-4 offsuit is very high. So, yeah, so I would go all in with 7-6 suited for 15 big blinds from the hijack. But I would not go all in with 7-6 offsuit from the button. So if you notice in this situation, there's 4 players behind me you can call, and I'm willing to go all in. But in this situation, there's only 2 players behind you can call, and I'm not willing to go all in. And so it matters so much when I have small cards. So if you remember the 3 factors of pre-flop play, right? It's cards, obviously the most important thing, and then position. So the later the position, the more frequently you can go all in, right? Effective stack size. The smaller your effective stack size, the less your risk is, so the more frequently you can go all in. And so one important thing to notice is when the effective stack size is small, you could get called with very weak cards just because their odds are so good. Like, do you remember a few classes ago, there was an example where the big blind called with 2-7 offsuit because you only had 3 big blinds or something? So when the odds are really good and the stack sizes are really small, you should be prepared to get called by any 2 cards. So one important thing to realize is to shove hands like 8-7 suited, the most important thing is that you have lots of chips, right? Because with hands like A7 suited, you don't want them to call with 9-6 offsuit. That hand just crushes it. But you don't care that much if they have call with a hand like Ace-King, because you're actually doing okay against good hands. So with hands like that, you basically, the most important thing is having lots of chips. So of these 3 factors, with a hand like 8-7 suited, effective stack size matters a lot more. You absolutely must have a lot of chips before you go all in, because you need them to fold very frequently. You need them to only call good hands, since your hand does well against good hands and bad against bad hands. Right? And then to shove hands like Ace-2 offsuit, the most important thing is having not that many players behind you. Because you don't care if you get called frequently. If the other guy's going to call you with 9-3 offsuit, you're ahead, you have an ace in your hand. But the most important thing with Ace-2 offsuit is you do not want lots of players behind you, because you're crushed if someone picks up Ace-Jack or like pocket queens or something, right? You're absolutely crushed against good hands, and you do well against bad hands. So when you're trying to go all in, there's basically 2 classes of hands.
And it's important to keep this in mind. So remember, there's always 3 factors of determining when you want to go all in, right? There's 3 factors. But the point is, for small student cards, you really need 3. Factors 3 is a lot more important. You need to have a lot of chips. And for cards like Ace-2 offsuit, King-6 offsuit, that have a big card in them but are just crushed by good hands, you need there to be 3 players behind you who have a chance of picking up pocket aces, pocket kings. Okay, so that's the end of the PowerPoint slides. I'm going to run through my tournament. Now I'm going to take a 3-minute break, I guess. I'll start again in 3 minutes. Yeah, if you have any questions, just go ahead and ask me.